right, good morning. I want to start my presentation with a general invitation to everyone here to join my cult. I'm a student of comparative religion, and this is the worst way to get someone to join a new religious movement. But by the end of my talk, you'll not only know how new religious movements grow, but how the same kinds of tactics appeal to the same groups of people to draw people into violent religious extremism, far-right militias, as well as conspiracy theories. We'll start with cults. So first off, what is a cult? In the academic study of religion, a cult is a new religious movement that doesn't have any links to established traditions in a society. So many religious historians say that yesterday's cults are today's world religions. But the word also has a pejorative everyday meaning that's more negative and critical. So to try and get some nuance, I'm going to adopt the language of some critics and psychologists of a destructive cult. These are cults that have a charismatic leader, somebody whose authority is beyond question. They use coercive techniques and indoctrination to bring members in and also to separate them from any connections and relationships they have outside of the group. And they exploit their members. They exploit them emotionally and financially. In the 1970s, American sociologists Stark and Bainbridge set out 8 principles of cult formation to try and explain how cults grow. 2 of them are really relevant to destructive cults. One is the idea of spreading through social networks. So the idea here is that when someone's relationships with those in a cult are stronger and more significant than their relationships with people outside of it, they're much more likely to join. And that can mean that people who are isolated, who don't have like a strong friendship network or strong connections, are much more vulnerable to being brought into a cult. Another principle is the idea of building tension with mainstream societies. So groups like the Rajneeshis in my home state of Oregon, they set themselves up as opponents of the conventional order, as people who are standing against the way the world does things. And this tends to bring in people who are already isolated and who don't have a strong stake in society as is. Stark and Bainbridge also introduced the idea of compensators. These are rewards that you get for affiliating with a new religious movement. And they're not subject to verification. They're kind of rewards that you have to believe in going into it. So cults offer people a mythology that helps explain the world, even if it's one that people outside of the organization aren't going to believe as well. They offer people a sense of belonging and purpose, and they give people what we can call an in-group social capital. So you can think about this as a kind of currency. It's something you can use to buy status and recognition and affirmation in the group, but in this case, it doesn't translate outside of it. So if you go to a party or put on your job application that you're a cult leader, it's unlikely to get you any favors and might get people to look down on you. But in the group, it sets yourself up as someone respectful. So these are all rewards that tend to further isolate the already isolated people that are drawn into these organizations. So how does this connect to violent religious extremism? First of all, studies done in North America and Europe have found again and again that a strong religious identity tends to prevent people from joining extremist organizations. The people who are much more likely to join, and actually the biggest predictor of whether or not someone will join, are people who don't have strong friend groups. And it doesn't matter if that's a football club or a mosque. Actually, one document that was recovered from the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria showed that 70% of the people who went to Syria or Iraq to fight were people who were only beginners or had a basic knowledge of religion. They weren't people who were highly religiously literate. The French-Iranian scholar, Farhad Khosrokhavar, laid out 4 steps that people tend to follow on the path to radicalization. And he was focusing on people in Europe who are more likely to get involved in these groups. The first step is a feeling of alienation from the dominant society. This is an area where people's experiences of discrimination and of a lack of access to opportunities in education or employment can tend to push them to feel this way. That leads to crime and incarceration, which leads to a religious awakening that often happens in prison with people who are already sort of down the wrong track. and with a spiritual leader who's maybe not associated or affiliated with the mainstream tradition. And actually, people getting indoctrinated at this stage, often they're discouraged from going to normal places of worship to keep them isolated and keep them in control. The last step is traveling to a country like Libya or Syria or Afghanistan to train for violent struggle. One former member who left one of these organizations said that religion was used to trap him like a wolf. So religion's kind of the bait. They're mostly appealing to these feelings of like disaffection and to people who maybe don't know any better. Here too, we can apply the framework of compensators. So people who join these groups, they gain a very powerful narrative. It's a story of struggle. It's an anti-colonial struggle. It's also a cosmic one. It's a fight of good against evil. But that's not the way people outside of the group are going to tell this story. They gain a validation for injustice. They gain some sense of meaning for the experience that they had of feeling tension and conflict between their religious identity and the society where they lived that led to that feeling of rejection. And they gain an in-group social capital. In this case, we can think of the saying that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Within the group, they're respected and their actions are seen as heroic, but outside of the group, the same actions are seen as reprehensible and criminal. So all these rewards are powerful, but they also further isolate people who buy into them. What about far-right militias? What are these? So these are groups like the Three Percenters and the Oath Keepers in the United States, or neo-Nazi and nationalist militias in Central Europe. They're characterized by their anti-government sentiments. They focus on culture war flashpoints like demographic change and gender equality. And they're also characterized by a readiness for violence. We can see that in some of the activities they engage in. They'll often stage combat training. In the US, the Oath Keepers advertise combat training as kind of community preparedness, and they'll start with first aid training, but they spend most of the time doing combat drills. So like how to shoot, how to enter a building or defend a position. They'll engage in vigilante patrols. They'll patrol the US-Mexico border, town squares in Europe, protests that they disagree with, and polling stations during elections. And they have engaged in insurrection. Some militia members in the US were involved in the January 6th insurrection in 2021. And last November in Germany, 8 members of a Saxony separatist group were arrested by German authorities after plotting attacks on the state. Far-right militias grow by appealing to people who see themselves as victims of social change, people who feel like they've been left behind or they don't have the status they once had. This is important to recognize because it shows how they put that feeling of discontent before ideology. They don't look for people who agree with them. They look for people who feel like left behind and feel outside the society. One former member of the Three Percenters said his life took a turn when he went to prison. After he got out of prison, he became interested in wilderness survival, got to know other survivalists, and then through them met the Three Percenters. So his trajectory into this movement took a very similar path to the one taken by violent religious extremists. Far-right militias also offer a similar set of rewards. They give people a heroic narrative to believe in. It's a story of people who are fighting to protect what they see as the character of the nation. It gives them a validation for their grievances because the group will tell them, it's not you, it's everyone else. You're not responsible for these failures. You're being oppressed by a society that's changing too fast or that's being manipulated. There's also an in-group social capital here where people feel like they're protecting each other and they're brothers in arms. So it's the same kind of social cohesion you'd seen in a military group, even though they often only get together for weekends in the woods. So in this case as well, they're attracting people who are isolated, and then the rewards they offer further isolate people from others. Conspiracy theories are non-empirical explanations for events and situations in the world. They're really dramatic stories of good versus evil, and in some ways they're better matched to the kinds of problems they're meant to explain. When it comes to something like a terror attack or climate change, the readiest answer and the obvious answer that these are humans making mistakes and being short-sighted doesn't seem really up to the task, and it can seem equally dramatic to say that it's the Illuminati. However, US psychologist Karen M. Douglas has said that these aren't really meant to give people answers. Conspiracy theories are about meeting people's emotional needs, and that's where the primary appeal is. They help satisfy people's need for knowledge and certainty in a world that often seems very confusing. They satisfy people's existential need to feel safe and secure in a world where there's a lot of challenges out there. And they satisfy people's narcissistic need to feel unique and special by having this kind of special knowledge. They can feel that they're different from everyone else. And that's actually one of the rewards, but one study put it this way, that conspiracy theories are for losers. They're for people who are disaffected, for people who feel like they're getting like the bad end of a deal. They gain a compelling explanation for how the world works, a validation of their feelings of powerlessness, but also this in-group social capital where they are members of a group who knows the truth, and they're above the ignorant sheep outside who only know the conventional explanation. So this is a kind of reward that further separates them from mainstream society. It can also lead to their further disempowerment, because people who believe in conspiracy theories might be less likely to participate in the democratic process where they could affect the kind of change that has so upset them or disempowered them. Okay, so what do these groups have in common? We can identify a few patterns. First of all, they're all hostile to conventional society. They're hostile to the way the world is working now. They appeal to people who are discontented, and they take that discontent and alienation and isolation first, and only later deal with ideology, religiosity, or the actual knowledge contained in a conspiracy theory. They offer people a sense of empowerment, but it's one based on coercion and control, and they give people a kind of group status, but one that only exists in the group and that further separates people from those outside. These issues are really important today because feelings of powerlessness and isolation are, in a way, a new normal that's led to a lot of young people being attracted by these groups, and it's why it's important to look out for them. There's, I think, 3 things we can do now. One is that we need to seek out community and create new communities and new connections, because those are the best ways of preventing people from buying into extremist beliefs. We need to question simple narratives. So people need to develop critical thinking skills and a willingness to challenge a comfortable explanation and accept that things are a lot more complex. We also need to set boundaries and to keep ourselves safe, but also to find ways to keep people who buy into extremist beliefs in our life, to keep those channels of communication open, to show them they have people in their life who care about them, and to understand that some of these beliefs can be emotional coping mechanisms that people turn to when their psychological needs aren't being met. If we can do those things, we can help build stronger, more resilient communities. We can find ways to be more critical. And I think most importantly, we can make sure everyone has a way to find belonging that doesn't come at such a high cost. Thank you.